A lot of the attacks against the United States have come from the Muslim world. I mean, this book was written before the attack at the Boston Marathon. And by the way, it's just been less than, 2 or 3 days ago we had another Boston Marathon. And this time it was free from attack. But the one thing the terrorists, I believe, have learned is that everybody today, almost everybody from 6 years old and above, is carrying a little camera of sorts and taking pictures with them. And every move you make might be being recorded. And that's how the terrorists who bombed the Boston Marathon a little bit more than a year ago were caught. Private citizens with their own little cameras and camcorders and their own cell phone cameras turned in their photographs to the FBI, who analyzed them and noticed the persons who looked like they were nonchalant and unconcerned, and persons who were carrying backpack in one picture and were not carrying backpacks in another. And hey, you know, these are what we were looking for. The attack on September 11th was led by Osama bin Laden, and bin Laden was upset, not because of the United States' help for Israel, but because Saddam Hussein was going to invade Arabia. So we moved in with our armies to defend Arabia, but we put foreign troops on what they considered holy Arab soil. And this upset Osama bin Laden, who said that foreign troops of that variety should never be placed on Arab soil, even if it's to defend our own land of Arabia. And I say, well, what we might should have done is just simply let Saddam Hussein happen. Particularly, now, hey, and I don't mean to knock any group. I was part of the army one time, but they objected. Osama bin Laden and his group objected to black Christian women being part of the army. Again, our army consists of its own citizens, and black Christian women make up a high percentage of our army. And I must say this in favor of our army was able to win. We were able to drive Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait and drive him, keep him from attacking Arabia. No, he was upset. I mean, how do you reason with people like that, folk? You go into it if you don't. I say next time someone wants to invade Saudi Arabia, let them go in. Let them have them. But then again, I'm not in charge. He also objected to the fact that our chaplains set up chapels on holy Arabian soil, Christian chapels, which is illegal in Arabia. I mean, hey, you can't send troops into combat without allowing them to undergo religious service first. I mean, I think every officer knows men fight better after they've been in the religious service. But hey, you know, you're going to conduct religion our way in our country, or you're not going to conduct it at all. Now, foreign workers are becoming a big issue in a lot of countries, particularly. A lot of Turks have relocated to Germany. In other words, as Europeans are declining in population, I want to say this about Germany too. The Germans have practiced birth control and abortion for so long and so well that their population is declining, and it's believed that, well, birth control and abortion have killed a lot or destroyed a lot more of their population than the 9 million people they lost in World War II. So, to get the work done, they have to call in foreign immigrants, mostly Muslim. And foreign immigrant workers are becoming a problem because these workers come in, do the work that needs to be done, but then they don't take any part in politics. They wind up making trouble. They wind up complaining, griping, and saying we want to be treated just like everybody else, even though they don't want to get involved. They just want the benefits. And a lot of European countries are beginning to say, we're sorry, we just can't take in any more foreign workers, and trying to encourage the foreign workers they have to leave. In the case of the United States, we're getting a lot of Mexicans moving in from, well, Latin Americans, mostly Mexicans, moving in and coming in here illegally. That's a big issue and will probably remain a big issue for some time. The Dutch government has restricted immigration. The United States spends a lot of time talking about it. A big problem too is the Muslim women who come in oftentimes don't want to uncover their face because they're religious and we must veil our face. Well, when they start applying for a driver's license, should they uncover their face to have the picture made? Well, most countries have said, yes, you must uncover your face to have your picture made, but that's immodest. We don't uncover our faces for anyone. The judge said, well, in that case, we can't give you your license. Again, if any of you have heard of this, or have any ideas on it, you're welcome to say so. You have problems too with them if they work at supermarkets and a customer comes in to want to check out pork. The Muslim has a right to refuse to check them out. Have any of you ever heard anything about this? This should
happen in America.
What?
This should happen in America. We should have.
Yeah. Supposedly they have a right to not check you out if you're checking out pork because they don't want to touch the stuff. It creates some problems. In our own courts, in our own country, ruled that they have to remove their veil long enough to have the picture made for a driver's license, because a veiled picture just simply does not cut the mustard when it comes to telling who's who. I suppose all of you have driver's license, and yes, your driver's license probably has your picture on it. It's used for identification purposes. Show me some ID when you're flashing a credit card. Yeah, here's my driver's license. But again, a veiled picture won't do it. Also, some of these Muslim children will go to school, and you can tell they're Muslim because they'll wear religious symbols. And this presents a real problem because Christians are not allowed to wear religious symbols, yet Muslims supposedly are. Now, I don't know if I mentioned that in this class or not, but did you know that there are prayer rooms in public schools in America at taxpayer expense? You might say this is illegal. No, it's done in New York, in Michigan, and in California. They're Muslim prayer rooms. And the ACLU never utters a word of protest. How many of you have heard of this by any chance? Muslim prayer rooms, yeah, and I say rooms because the Muslims, when they pray, the men pray in one room and another. So basically, what I'm saying is it costs tens of thousands of dollars set aside, 2 classrooms. And the classrooms have to have a pool in them where the Muslims wash their feet before they pray. And then they have to have carpet, and they have to be oriented towards Mecca. One for the men and one for the women, at tens of thousands of dollars worth of expense to taxpayers, and these rooms are exclusively for Muslim students.
In public school?
My wife friend one of my pupils at another college one time, when I was teaching over in Dallas, she ran in, the boy realized her name was Cunningham, so he said, oh, I had a teacher, and it turned out it was me. He said, we didn't believe at first. I mean, he was one of our better pupils. So we got to looking up, and well, folks, go to the internet. I did several times. Muslim prayer rooms, public schools. Google it, and it will come up. Now, Newt Gingrich has said, well, if you're going to allow Muslims, you should allow Christians at least. If you're going to allow one, but here's the problem, folks. If you don't let the Muslims, they're going to start tearing the place up, killing, burning things down. Christians don't. Again, women's rights, Muslim women are treated like property, and who utters a word of protest? Muslim women are mutilated, have practiced what's called female circumcision. I don't want to go into detail, but essentially the genitalia is mutilated. And who utters protest? Nobody. Again, Muslim women are owned, and nobody says a word. Again, all right. Okay, so much for that. Um, well, green movements. Just yesterday we celebrated Earth Day. I was a junior in college when the first Earth Day was celebrated. And yeah, the hippies had a lot to do with it, but it was different back then. In 1970, a river in Ohio actually caught fire. It had so much oil on it that one day it caught on fire and burned, and it was difficult to put up. If they used water on it, that's what it was on top of already, and the water would just rise up. I mean, it was difficult to put out. The Great Lakes, where these rivers were emptying into, were almost devoid of life. Now, the situation was bad and something had to be done. So we began to pass laws. One law about, that the rivers should be cleaned up. And today the Great Lakes are thriving once again. The rivers are cleaner. Lake Ocoee there near Cleveland, Tennessee, if you even know what I'm talking about, Lake Ocoee was dead for many years. Too much copper got in it, killed everything. But now I understand that it will hold a little bit of life, and some hardy life is returning. Lake Hartwell has a lot of fish in it, but you can't eat the fish because became a little bit radioactive. It's hoped that someday Lake Hartwell will once again become the fish will become edible, but it's still restricted. But the lakes and rivers in our country and the air is being cleaned up. We were afraid that by 1980 the air would become unbreathable, so we put pollution control device on automobiles. Today we have 10 times the cars we had in 1970. I mean, literally. Our cities are more crowded cars than ever, but the air is cleaner than it was then. So again, if you think that, hey, why should I have to pay to have my pollution control checked? I gladly pay it because I believe that we need clean air. So when it comes time, I mean, new cars don't have to be checked, but when your car gets a little bit older and you have to have a pollution control device, I mean, if your pollution control check, your emissions checked, be happy. It has saved our environment. Yeah, many of you know what I'm talking about. Your older cars have to have a check done on your emissions. Now, your electric cars are exempt, of course, obviously. Green movement. One thing about China, their land is so polluted that they're actually wearing masks. What we figured might happen in our country, but they're wearing masks. Because China's, number one, it has more people than we do, and they're more crowded together. Now, our population centers, we have a big population center in New York, one in Los Angeles, one here in Atlanta. Our people are scattered. In China might look big on the map, but only about 1/5 of the land has very many people. The rest, and they are crowded together. They're in China proper and in Manchuria, 2 places, and they are really crowded. And some of the pollution from China is now reaching our west coast. It might not reach us here in Atlanta because between our west coast and here are the Rocky Mountains. But it's said that 5 to 10% of the pollution in Los Angeles now comes from China. 10,000 miles across the Pacific. All right. The book goes on to talk about art. Regrettably, I have a daughter who's majoring in art. I don't know much about art. I'll skip that because I got to move on anyway. Science and technology. Computers, the biggest invention I've seen. I mean, okay, I'm old enough to, we would talk about what's the world going to be like by the year 2000. What's the world going to be like? There's not a whole lot of differences, but the number one difference, folks, is the microchip. The microchip has led to several things, including the use of cell phones. We didn't have these when I was a kid. A handheld calculator, probably most of you don't use them anymore, but that came out in 1974. The little bitty miniature TV camera. The first camcorder they carried to the moon weighed 7 pounds, and it was the best they could do. I mean, it was fairly big. This one is better than that. It takes better pictures even.